You've reached the stage of where you're ready to start building out your site, but there is some preparation work that needs to be done before you actually do that. And so that's going to be the subject of this video, the preparation you need to do before you actually start putting diggers into the ground. This is part of the build it phase, and specifically the fundamental stage within our Build It and Prosper roadmap. So the first thing that you need to look at is the site setup, and that's essentially going to be the subject of this video. Incidentally, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe now. There's coming up for almost 300 videos, so there's plenty of information there to consume, and we really would appreciate your support. So the site setup is about getting everything ready to start building out your site, and so there's considerations that need to be put into place. So what you've done up to now is that you've found your site. Obviously you've taken it through the planning process, got permission to build, you've taken it through building regulations, you've satisfied those, you've planned your build, you've lined up your subcontractors, you've lined up your materials, who you're going to get your materials from, negotiated the prices, and you've put your funding in place, and you're ready to start building. So the first thing is that you need to be looking at the actual site itself, and there's three considerations. So the first consideration is you need to look at your health and safety considerations. So that's going to be putting in things like security fencing. It's going to be making sure that the site is secure, so that people can't just walk onto the site. They might get injured, members of the public can get injured very easily, and then you have an insurance claim against you, or you have a lawsuit in the worst case scenario. And while you might think those things protect you, part of the judgment that somebody will make is how far you went to mitigate the issues. So if you've got, for instance, no security fencing, no gate, and people can just walk onto your site, they'll say, well, you didn't actually take precautions preventing people to walking on the site. Now, even if they do walk on the site and you've got all those things in place, doesn't actually limit you from the liability. So you need to think about, once they're on the site, what are the things that are going to mitigate them not getting injured. So for instance, if you had a big ditch at some point and you didn't cover over, then there's a chance that they could fall into that ditch. And while you might be saying, well, they shouldn't be on the site, that's not the way that the law will look at it, unfortunately. So so there is these sort of bizarre situations. I can remember, because I lived in the States, there was actually a lawsuit of a burglar who entered somebody's house. The floor in the house was wet. They tripped and they injured themselves and ended up with a leg in plaster. And the judged people who owned the house hadn't taken enough precautions to prevent this person from falling. Seems bizarre, but they actually, the person who was a burglar, won the lawsuit. And so it's very much similar situation that you could have on your own site. So you need to always be looking to mitigate these circumstances. The second thing is you need to think about, what plant are you going to need? So this is going to be part of the planning process, but you want to make sure that the plant is going to arrive at the time when your contractors that are going to use the plant are going to be available. Now, some contractors will supply their own plant, but sometimes you're going to have to bring plant in to help those contractors. So you've got to make sure the two are aligned, so as that you're not wasting money on having the plant available but no contractor to operate it, or in the other situation where the contractors arrived and there is no plant. Now, one of the big dangers of that is that if the contractor arrives and there's no plant, they may say, okay, well, I'm going off to do this other job, and you might not see them for 2 or 3 weeks. So that can just have a huge knock-on effect. So coordinating that and making sure that your plant and your contractors arrive at the same time is really important. The next area that you need to look at is the welfare of your contractors. So you have an obligation to provide certain things, look after the welfare. So somewhere for them to eat and rest for their breaks, also somewhere for them to be warm, to dry their clothing if it's necessary, because we know we have inclement weather in the UK, and so therefore the chances are that at some point they're going to get wet. How do they dry off their clothes? How do they protect themselves from the severest of weather? So you need to have welfare facilities. What happens if there's an accident? Do you have those procedures in place? What happens about reporting the accident, but also looking after the welfare of that particular person? person that's had an accident? Is there a first aid kit available? Where's the first aid kit provided? So there's a huge bunch of regulations that you have to satisfy under CDM regulations, they call them. And then also there is a moral obligation to be able to look after your contractors, irrespective of what the law actually says. So providing your welfare procedures. And the fourth area, which I've already touched upon, is the health and safety. Not only the health and safety in reference to the welfare facilities, but also the health and safety on site. So some of that is we've talked about in terms of the security fencing, but there's other considerations, particularly as the site starts to move ahead and you've got scaffolding. How do you protect people from going onto the scaffolding that shouldn't be on the scaffolding? How do you make sure that the scaffolding complies and is safe for people to go on? What do you do about visitors coming onto the site? How do you control the flow of visitors? Is there a clear path for them to keep them away from the construction area? What checks and balances are? Do you have visitor books for them to sign in? So there's a whole bunch of health and safety things to consider there as well on site. So it's a huge area, and these are things you have to think about and get ready before you actually start building out your site. And then the next thing that you're going to do, you're assuming that you've got all these things in place, you're ready to actually start building the foundations. So the first thing you're going to do is what we call a strip of the site. So you're going to basically take off the topsoil. Hopefully that's of good quality. You're going to want to retain some of that on site for the landscaping when you've completed, but you're probably going to have too much because it bulks up by about 50%. So you're probably going to have too much of that. So you need to know how you're going to dispose of that particular topsoil, and also the other soil which is not going to be so that you don't want on site as well, because you're going to be digging the foundations. Where are you going to dispose of those of that particular topsoil and the other soil that you're going to dig out for the trenches for your foundations? So you need to make arrangements. That's probably going to be having some sort of trucks to take it away. So again, plant, so that could be a dumper truck to load up the larger trucks that will then take the soil away. Where is that going to be disposed? Have you an agreement with a local farmer, or is that going to go to the landfill? And so those are considerations that you have to plan for before you actually start developing out the site. So there's lots of things before you actually start building the foundations that you have to consider. And then finally, you are going to break ground, dig the foundations. As we talked about before, you need to dispose of that soil, but you also have to be bringing in the components for the foundations. It's probably going to be ready mix cement that you're going to bring in. That needs to be timed so that, because you have only a limited time to actually work that cement, so you've got to make sure that you've got enough people on board ready to receive that delivery of cement. Also, what tends to happen is that they have a certain waiting time that they allow you in the court, and if you keep that truck longer there because you didn't have enough people to work it, then you're going to be charged in excess for that. So again, there's a cost implication in terms of not having yourself set up properly to do that. So I hope you found that useful. It's a small overview. I do talk about it in my book, You a Property Developer, from page 65 onwards. If you'd like a copy of that, you can get it for free. Just simply go to youapropertydeveloper.com. All I ask is that you pay for the postage and packaging. Also, you will get access to a land finding course that I've created to go along with the book. Again, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe now, and I look forward to speaking to you in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.